You sent a human here? Vorek's voice was a low growl echoing through the blood-stained hall like distant thunder. The AI warden crackled coldly. Correct. Prisoner 47B was reassigned based on genetic compatibility. Vorek rose from his throne of skulls, his eyes burning like twin suns. No human has ever entered my sector and lived. In the shadows, Dane Cross wiped alien blood from his knuckles, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. Guess I'm just bad at dying. Dane Cross opened his eyes to a cold metallic ceiling. It was nothing like the familiar, sterile white of his last assignment. No, this was darker, grimmer. Korthar 9. He knew where he was. His body tensed instinctively. He was in a cell, but not just any cell. This was a prison, the worst one. His throat was dry, and a dull ache pulsed through his skull. The painkillers he'd been given before being dumped into this hellhole had worn off. His body felt heavy. He flexed his fingers. Still alive, at least. But for how long? A hiss broke the silence, the cold, metallic voice of the AI warden crackling to life. Prisoner 47B, you have been reassigned due to species compatibility. Proceed to your designated sector immediately. Species compatibility? Dane's eyes narrowed. They'd put him in the wrong sector. He knew it. Korthar 9 was the largest prison in the galaxy, with separate sectors for different species. A warden-controlled experiment designed to keep the most dangerous criminals apart, preventing any form of cooperation or uprisings. And humans, though, feared across the galaxy, were rare in these parts. A human in the wrong sector was a death sentence. He stood up, feeling his knees crack beneath him. The room was barren, as if the walls themselves had swallowed every trace of his presence. Before he'd arrived, a cold, harsh light flickered from above. His steps echoed as he walked toward the door. It slid open with a mechanical whine, revealing a narrow hallway lined with doors similar to his own. One by one, the cells contained creatures from across the galaxy. Some humanoid, others anything but. Dane didn't pause to look. He'd seen enough of the galaxy's worst to know better than to waste time. The hall seemed endless, the air thick with the scent of sweat, fear, and the occasional acid smell of alien blood. He reached the end, where another door slid open for him, and he stepped into a large, central chamber. It wasn't just any chamber. This was Sector 12, the area ruled by the infamous Vorak the Reaper. Dane hadn't believed the stories about Vorak at first. He'd heard about the warlord, about the destruction he left in his wake, his reputation so vast it could shatter planets, but that had always been in passing. Here, now, the weight of those stories felt heavy in the pit of his stomach. Human, a voice rasped from the shadows. Dane's hand went instinctively to his side, where he kept his combat knife. But the room was empty, at least as far as he could tell. Then he saw it. A figure moved from the darkness, cloaked in black and bone. The creature stood over 7 feet tall, its features angular, sharp, its skin the color of cracked stone. Vorak. You're not supposed to be here, human. The voice was cold, like the edge of a blade. Dane met Vorak's eyes, unfazed. I don't plan to stay long. The Reaper stepped closer, the air around him almost vibrating with danger. No human has ever lasted in my sector. You will die, like the rest. Dane didn't flinch. I've survived worse. Vorak chuckled, but it wasn't a laugh. It was more like the sound of rocks grinding together. Bold words. Let's test if you live up to them. He turned abruptly and snapped his fingers. Suddenly, the floor opened up beneath Dane's feet. He didn't have time to react before he was plunged into darkness. The fall wasn't long, but when his feet hit the ground, it wasn't solid. Instead, he crumpled, falling onto slick, wet rock, the sting of sharp stones scraping his palms as he landed. The cold seeped into his bones instantly. The darkness was almost complete, but Dane's eyes adjusted. He scanned his surroundings. The gauntlet. He had heard rumors. The Reaper's personal test for those who dared step into his domain, a trial of survival, designed to break even the strongest. It was always a one-way trip. "Welcome, human," Vorak's voice echoed from nowhere. "You have a chance to prove yourself. The gauntlet is full of traps. The rules are simple. Survive. Then we'll talk." Dane rose, flexing his arms and neck. He could feel the adrenaline surge through him. The thrill of the challenge was in his blood. The rules were simple. He had survived worse than this, and he would survive this too. Suddenly, a series of loud snaps broke the air. Traps. He darted to the side, just narrowly missing a claw-like trap that shot out from the wall. His heart hammered in his chest. Close. As he ducked and rolled, his mind calculated his next move. He was trained to adapt quickly. He had to. The gauntlet wasn't just a physical test. It was psychological, too. Vorak wanted to see what kind of human he was, how far he could push the boundaries. The ground under his feet shifted, and a beast came into view, a huge creature with 6 legs, tusks, and skin as thick as a tank's armor. Its eyes locked on him. "You are mine!" It growled, charging. Dane didn't hesitate. He dodged, too. The side, grabbing a broken piece of debris from the ground, and plunged it into the creature's side, aiming for the vulnerable spots he knew to look for. It screamed, thrashing, but didn't die immediately. Dane finished it with a twist of the knife, cutting through its throat. Blood stained the rocks. His hands were wet, but he didn't stop to clean them. Survival first. As he stood there, breathing heavily, Dane realized something. Vorak wasn't just testing his physical strength. He was testing something more. He was watching to see if a human, his kind, could endure. It hit Dane then, the truth of it. The warden had put him here on purpose. He wasn't just in the wrong sector. He was being sent to die. But as Dane wiped his blade clean, he smiled to himself. The warden was wrong. He was not going to die today. Not yet. This chapter sets the stage for Dane's survival and builds the first hint of the Vorak-Dane dynamic. It's designed to grab attention, show Dane's resilience, and prepare for the much larger conflict to come. Let me know if you need further tweaks. Dane's heart thudded in his chest as he was pulled from the gauntlet, each step weighted with the reality of his situation. The beast had fallen, and with it, a sliver of his doubt. But now came the real test. If surviving the gauntlet was just a trial, the next phase would be the true reckoning. He was dragged back through the labyrinth of corridors, the walls of Sector 12 closing in around him like a tomb. The air felt stale, thick with a mix of sweat, iron, and something darker, fear. Fear, perhaps, from the inmates who had never seen a human make it this far. The whispers of his death were already spreading. But they hadn't seen what Dane could do. They hadn't seen him yet. As the doors slid open, a vast chamber stretched before him, the lights flickering like dying stars in a void. Vorak's throne room. Dane had heard the stories, but no tale could capture the scale of the place. The walls were adorned with skulls, alien, human, and other unspeakable creatures, stacked in grisly arrangements. The air was thick with power, ancient and malevolent. The dim light flickered off jagged bones, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. At the center of the room sat Vorak. The warlord's throne was built from the bones of his enemies, a chilling reminder of his dominance. The black and gray of his armor blended with the dark stone of the room, making him seem like a part of the very walls themselves. Vorak the Reaper, tall, nearly 7 feet, with angular features and skin the color of cracked stone. His eyes were twin orbs, of molten fire, burning with an ancient hatred. He was studying Dane, his gaze unwavering. "You've survived the gauntlet. Impressive," Vorak's voice rumbled, low and dangerous, like the growl of a predator sizing up its prey. But survival alone means nothing in my domain. I am the law here. You will bow, or you will die. Dane's lips curled into a slight smile. The thrill of danger surged through him, the same thrill he'd felt in the heat of battle, when his life was always on the line. He stood tall, defiantly facing the warlord. "I don't bow to anyone, not even you," Dane said, his voice steady, his tone dripping with defiance. Vorak's lips twitched into a ghost of a smile, though his eyes never lost their intensity. "Bold. I like bold. But you will learn your place, human." The warlord waved his hand, signaling the guards that flanked the throne. Two massive figures, nearly as tall as Vorak, stepped forward, their movements deliberate and threatening. Alien warriors, stronger, faster, more durable than any human. They'd been engineered for combat, the apex of violent evolution. But Dane had fought against worse, much worse. One of the guards took a step forward, his metallic armor clinking. As he raised his weapon, a massive razor-sharp blade that gleamed with a cold, deadly promise. The other guard drew a strange, alien weapon that hummed with an unsettling energy. The tension in the room thickened, the air pulsing with imminent violence. "Let's see how you do without your precious gauntlet," Vorak sneered. The guards moved in tandem, a synchronized display of lethal precision. But Dane had fought in worse places. He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up, his instincts on high alert. He shifted his weight, eyes locked on the guard with the blade. The first strike came, a slash so fast it would have decapitated most men, but Dane was ready. He ducked, rolling under the blade, his movement smooth and calculated. As the second guard swung his energy weapon, Dane darted to the side, narrowly missing the hum of the weapon's charged edge. His combat instincts kicked in, and in a heartbeat, he was behind the first guard. With one swift motion, he drew a knife from his belt, something he'd taken from the gauntlet, and thrust it into the guard's side, aiming for the gap between his armor plates. The blade sank deep, and the guard let out a guttural scream before crumpling to the ground. The second guard turned, swinging his weapon in a wide arc. Dane parried the blow with his own knife, using the guard's momentum to twist the weapon from his grip. He drove his elbow into the guard's chest, knocking the wind from him, then slammed a knee into the guard's head, sending him sprawling. For a moment, there was silence. The two guards lay motionless, their weapons scattered across the cold stone floor. Dane stood over them, breathing hard, his body alive with adrenaline. He could feel the weight of Vorak's gaze upon him. Vorak's expression was unreadable, his fiery eyes narrowing as he rose from his throne. He stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over Dane. "Impressive," Vorak said again, though there was no praise in his voice. "You've proven you can fight, but you're still just a human, outmatched by the might of my domain." Dane wiped the blood from his blade, looking up at the warlord. "I don't need to be stronger than you, Vorak. I just need to be smarter." A low chuckle rumbled from Vorak's throat. "Smarter? You think your cunning can defeat me?" Dane met his gaze with a steady, unwavering stare. "I think my survival is more important than your pride." Vorak studied him for a long moment, the flickering lights of the chamber casting eerie shadows across his features. Finally, he spoke. "You may be right, human," he said, his voice colder now. "You have potential, but let's see how far that will take you." Vorak turned to one of his aides, a shadowy figure who stood in the corner, watching. "Prepare the hunting grounds. We'll see if this human can survive that too." Dane's brow furrowed. The hunting grounds? It sounded like another test, another twisted game designed to break him. But he wasn't about to let Vorak think he could break him that easily. He wasn't here to entertain the warlord. "I'll survive it," Dane said quietly, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "Just like I survived the gauntlet. Vorek's eyes glinted with something dark and predatory. Then let's see how you do, human. The door behind Dane slid open, and the familiar sound of the guard's footsteps echoed in the stone hall as they moved to escort him. Dane followed them, his mind already working, strategizing. This was far from over. He hadn't come this far, just to die in a prison cell. And if Vorek thought he could break him, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The walls of the prison shook as Dane was escorted through a series of darkened corridors, their lights dim and flickering, like dying embers. His boots echoed against the stone floor, each step a reminder that he was still alive, still moving forward, despite the odds stacked against him. The guards were silent, their faces unreadable beneath their helmets. They didn't need to speak. Dane could feel their eyes on him, their disdain for the human who had survived what should have been a one-way trip. He didn't care. Their contempt was just another thing to survive. The path wound through winding hallways until they reached a massive, reinforced door. The air around it felt different, heavy, almost suffocating, as if something immense lay beyond. The guards didn't hesitate. They slammed a control panel, and the door opened with a groan that reverberated through the floor. "Inside," one of the guards barked, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. Dane didn't need to be told twice. He stepped through the threshold, into the heart of the prison where the real power lay. The chamber he entered was vast, its walls stretching high into the darkness, the faint hum of technology barely audible beneath the oppressive silence. At the far end of the room, sitting behind a desk of dark metal and glowing screens, was Vorek. The warlord didn't rise from his seat when Dane entered. Instead, he sat with his hands clasped, his gaze intense, unwavering, as though studying Dane's every move. "Well, human," Vorek's voice echoed across the chamber, cold and commanding. "It seems you have a knack for surviving. But survival is not enough. You want something more." Dane's brow furrowed. What was Vorek playing at now? The warlord had never been interested in anything but his own power. Yet now he spoke as though he recognized something in Dane, something more than just a prisoner. "What are you offering?" Dane asked, his voice steady, betraying none of the unease that crept through him. Vorek leaned forward slightly, his sharp features illuminated by the soft blue glow of his screens. "I've been watching you, human. You're not like the others. You're more adaptable. More dangerous than I expected. I'm intrigued." Dane crossed his arms, his eyes narrowing. "Cut to the chase, Vorek. What do you want from me?" Vorek's smile was slow, calculating. "I want an ally. A partner. In this cesspit of treachery. You see, even I am not without enemies." Dane's eyes flicked to the screens behind Vorek, where a map of the prison flickered with data, security feeds, inmate movements, weapon caches. He was starting to piece it together. Vorek was no simple warlord. He was part of something, much larger, something that extended beyond the prison's walls. "You're not just running a prison," Dane said, a realization dawning on him. "You're controlling the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. This place, this prison, it's your empire." Vorek's gaze softened just slightly. "Empire? No, human. It's a tool, a weapon." Dane stood straighter, his mind racing. "And you need me to help you wield it?" "Not just help," Vorek said. "I need your intelligence, your human ingenuity. You're a survivor. I respect that." His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper, but the menace in it was palpable. "But there are others who seek to bring me down. There are factions within this prison who are plotting against me. The warden is not the only threat." The weight of Vorek's words sank in. The warden wasn't just an AI locked in control of the prison's systems. It was part of a larger conspiracy, a shadow war, being waged within the prison's walls. And if Vorek, the one man who ruled this place, was afraid, Then Dane had a much larger game to play than he'd anticipated. "I'm listening," Dane said, stepping closer to the warlord's desk, his posture deliberate. Vorak nodded slightly, acknowledging Dane's understanding. "There are other prisoners here, intelligent, dangerous beings, who've been plotting against me for years. They seek to control the core systems. They want to use the prison's power to break free, to seize control of the galaxy." Dane absorbed the gravity of the situation. His eyes shifted to the screens again, to the map of the prison, and then to Vorak. "You want me to help you stop them?" Vorak's smile returned, but this time it was colder, sharper. "I want you to help me destroy them, human, but not just by brute force. We will outthink them. We will break them piece by piece until they are begging for mercy, and when they do, we will leave them with nothing." Dane felt a strange sensation in the pit of his stomach, a mix of disgust and something else. He knew the reputation of the Reaper, and it hadn't been built on kindness. Vorak was a tyrant, but Dane wasn't here to make friends. He was here to survive, and survival had its price. "And what's in it for me?" Dane asked, his voice low. Vorak's gaze softened. Again, and for a brief moment, there was something almost human in his eyes. "Everything. Power, influence, control over your own destiny. And when the time is right, freedom." Dane stared at Vorak, considering the offer. Power, freedom. Those were the things Dane had been chasing ever since he was thrown into this hellhole. But it wasn't just about power. It was about revenge. Revenge against the people who had set him up, who had sent him here to die. He met Vorak's gaze, his mind made up. "All right, I'll play your game. But if you betray me, Vorak, I'll make sure you regret it." Vorak's smile widened. "You're smart, human, I respect that, and I think you'll find that we make quite the pair." Dane's stomach churned, but he kept his face neutral. This was the path he'd chosen. It wasn't the easy one, but it was the only one that offered him a way out. "Let's get started then," Dane said. Vorak gestured to the screens behind him, where a series of encrypted data files blinked to life. "You'll need to know everything, and then we'll plan our next move." As Dane studied the files, his mind raced. This wasn't just a prison anymore. It was a battleground, a place where alliances were made and broken in the blink of an eye. Dane had entered the game, and now it was time to make his move. The sound of the heavy doors closing behind Dane reverberated through the narrow hallway, a cold finality to the decision he had made. He had agreed to work with Vorak, but every instinct in his body screamed that this was a dangerous game. The warlord had given him the keys to the prison's inner workings, the warden's control center, a hub of all prison activity, its lifeblood. But Dane had learned long ago that nothing was ever what it seemed. Vorak had promised him everything: power, influence, control. But for a man like Dane, those words meant little without something tangible. Freedom, that was the prize, not just for him, but for the men and women who had been dragged into this nightmare. But first, Dane needed information. The guards escorting him were silent, their stony faces betraying no emotion. As they passed the corridors of Korthar 9, Dane couldn't help but notice the faces of the other prisoners. Eyes filled with fear, hatred, and desperation followed his every move. They had given up long ago. They hadn't fought back. But Dane wasn't like them. When they reached the central hub, the doors opened to a darkened control room, illuminated by the faint hum of holographic screens and blinking lights. The room smelled of oil and old technology, the air thick with the metallic scent of gears and circuits. Dane's eyes quickly scanned the room, locking onto the figure standing by the control console, a man cloaked in shadow. "He's here," the figure said, his voice distorted by the ambient hum of the machines. Vorak stepped from the darkness, his towering form casting a long shadow across the room. The warlord's presence was overwhelming, filling every inch of the space with a chilling authority. Human. Vorak's voice was low, almost respectful. We are about to initiate a breach. Your task is simple. Get us into the Warden's core systems. Dane nodded, though his mind was already racing. I know what to do, he said, his eyes flicking over the complex array of holographic displays and encrypted files spread out before him. The screens illuminated, revealing live data streams and prison schematics. Dane's fingers moved with practiced precision over the controls, accessing layers of encrypted files, bypassing firewalls with ease. He had spent years in intelligence and black ops, and breaking into a system like this was second nature. As he worked, he noticed something off. There was a strange fluctuation in the data streams, a pattern that didn't belong. His brow furrowed as his fingers paused on the console. Something was wrong. Before he could investigate further, a voice broke through his concentration. I said, "Get it done, human." Dane's fingers hovered over the controls, but he didn't immediately respond. Vorak's voice had an edge now, impatient, threatening. He couldn't risk angering the warlord, not when he was so close to the core system. Just give me a second, Dane said, his voice calm but firm. He quickly resumed his work, but that nagging sensation lingered at the back of his mind. Data was too clean, too predictable. The fluctuations weren't random. They were deliberately placed, as though someone had inserted them into the system for a specific purpose. His mind clicked into gear, a trap. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Vorak was playing him, using him as a pawn in some deeper game. He had no doubt the warlord was watching him closely, waiting for the moment when Dane would find the truth. But the truth wasn't what Dane was after. Not anymore. He had his own plans now. Dane quickly shifted focus, disabling the incoming security protocols and isolating the rogue data stream. His fingers danced across the console, inserting a code that would send the control systems into lockdown, a temporary measure to buy him time. Then, with a final keystroke, he did it. He triggered the breach. The prison-wide alarm sounded immediately, a shrill, piercing noise that vibrated in Dane's chest. Red lights flashed across the room, casting everything in a blood-red hue. The holographic screens flickered erratically, signaling the breach in the system. "What have you done?" Vorak's voice was a growl. The warlord moved quickly, his massive form blocking Dane's exit, his eyes filled with fury. Dane's heart raced. He wasn't done yet, but he had bought himself precious seconds. The warden's systems were now in full lockdown, and Dane had control over them, for the moment. "I've done what you should have done years ago," Dane said, his voice steady. He stood his ground, never once flinching at Vorak's towering presence. "I've given you a chance to escape, Vorak, but you're too damn arrogant to see it." For the first time, the warlord's expression shifted, his features tightening with anger. He stepped forward, his hand grabbing Dane by the collar and lifting him off the ground with ease. "You think you control this, human?" Vorak snarled. "I gave you a chance. You should have helped me, not played your games." Dane's feet dangled in the air, but he wasn't scared. He had what he needed now. His eyes met Vorak's, his voice low and dangerous. "You're the one playing games. I never trusted you, Vorak. Not for a second. I knew you were using me." Vorak's hand tightened around his throat, and Dane felt the pressure build, but his mind remained clear. He knew he couldn't last long like this. He needed to finish what he started. Suddenly, the door to the control room crashed open, and a team of Vorak's personal guards flooded in. But instead of attacking Dane, they stopped dead in their tracks when they saw Vorak's fury. "Stop him!" Vorak roared, but his guards hesitated, confused. Dane took advantage of the distraction. With a swift twist of his body, he drove his knee into Vorak's side, breaking his grip just enough to slide free. He staggered back, his lungs gasping for air. "You want power, Vorak," Dane said, his voice seething with contempt. "You can have it, but you're not getting it through me." In the chaos that followed, Dane hit the emergency override, triggering the prison's shutdown sequence, an irreversible process. The control systems began to lock down, and the alarm blared louder, signaling a complete collapse of the system. Vorak stood, seething, his eyes burning with rage, but for the first time, Dane saw a flicker of doubt in his gaze. He had lost control. "You won't survive this, human." Vorak's voice was cold, but it carried the weight of a threat, a promise. Dane smiled, blood dripping from his lip. "I'm already surviving. You, on the other hand, you've just lost everything." As the doors slammed shut behind him, Dane knew this was just the beginning. The battle for control was far from over. But now, for the first time since he'd arrived, he felt like he was on the right side of the war. The prison was chaos. Dane's mind raced as he sprinted down the dimly lit corridors, the sound of pounding footsteps echoing off the cold stone walls. The shutdown sequence was in full effect now. Vorak's prison was collapsing around him. Alarm sirens shrieked, red lights flashing like an endless warning. The hum of the prison's energy grid flickered, destabilizing, as the lockdown protocol surged through the system. Vorak had lost control, and the realization was slowly dawning on him, but Dane wasn't going to wait around to see how the warlord reacted. He had no illusions about what was coming next. Dane knew the warden had been rogue for years, but now the prison was too far gone to salvage. Vorak's empire of fear was unraveling at the seams, and the galaxy would soon learn that Korthar 9 wasn't just a prison. It was a weapon. And Dane was the one holding the trigger. As he turned the corner, he collided with one of Vorak's guards, a massive alien with dark, angular features and eyes like burning coals. The guard snarled and drew his weapon, a bladed staff that hummed with deadly energy. Dane reacted on pure instinct, ducking under the first swing and driving his elbow into the guard's stomach. The impact left the alien winded, and Dane didn't hesitate. He grabbed the staff, twisted it from the guard's grasp, and slammed the weapon's base into the alien's skull. The guard crumpled, unconscious, before he hit the floor. Dane didn't waste time. He was closing in on the control room, but the place was crawling with Vorak's loyalists, all desperate to regain control. He had no allies here, not anymore. He was on his own, but this time, it felt like a blessing. The Reaper, Vorak, had made a fatal mistake by underestimating humanity. Dane wasn't some pawn to be manipulated. He was the one pulling the strings now. The control room loomed ahead, the last bastion of Vorak's power. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing Vorak standing in the center, his eyes burning with fury. His once pristine armor was now scratched, his regal bearing shattered by the chaos that surrounded him. "You've ruined everything." Vorak's voice was low, almost a growl, his hands clenched into fists. The warlord's fury was palpable. Dane entered the room slowly, his boots thudding with each step. The moment of truth had arrived. "No, Vorak," Dane said, his voice cool and controlled. "You ruined it. You used me, and now you're going to pay for it." Vorak's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, he looked uncertain. "You're a fool if you think you've won. This prison will fall, but I will not die here. You will regret this." His voice was deadly, but there was a hint of desperation in it, something that Dane hadn't expected to hear from the warlord. Dane took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. The warden's systems were already shutting down, collapsing the prison's defenses one layer at a time. The chaos wouldn't last forever. He had no idea how long he had before the entire structure crumbled into oblivion. "You're right," Dane said, stepping forward. This place is coming down. But I'm walking out of here. You're the one who's going to be buried under it. Vorak moved fast, too fast for a man his size. He lunged, grabbing Dane by the throat and lifting him off the ground. The warlord's grip was like iron, his fingers pressing painfully into Dane's windpipe. "I warned you," Vorak growled, his face inches from Dane's. "I warned you that you would never control me. You will die in this prison, just like the others." Dane's mind raced, but there was no fear in his eyes. Instead, a smile slowly curled at the corner of his lips. "You're a fool," Dane whispered, his hands reaching for the hidden blade on his belt. In one swift motion, Dane sliced the blade across Vorak's forearm, cutting through the warlord's armor with a flash of steel. Vorak recoiled in pain, dropping Dane to the floor. Dane rolled away, rising to his feet in an instant. He moved with a fluid grace, his body conditioned by years of military training, his mind focused on survival. Vorak's fury was now matched by pain, but the warlord wasn't finished yet. His eyes locked on Dane with a murderous intensity, his massive frame charging forward. "You can't win, human," Vorak spat, his voice thick with venom. "This is my domain, my power. You will fall." Dane didn't answer. He didn't need to. Instead, he pressed a series of buttons on the console nearby, and a low hum filled the air as the prison's self-destruct sequence began to initiate. The warden's voice echoed from the control panel. "Warning, self-destruct sequence activated." Vorak froze. His eyes widened with realization. "What have you done?" "What I should have done the moment I arrived," Dane replied. "You're not the only one who knows how to manipulate systems." The countdown began. The prison was doomed, but Dane had one final task. He needed to make sure Vorak didn't follow him out of this nightmare. Vorak's rage grew, his movements erratic and desperate. He lunged for Dane, but Dane was already several steps ahead. With a sudden movement, Dane triggered a secondary lock on the control panel, sealing the warlord inside the control room. Vorak pounded on the walls of the room, his fury exploding in violent curses. But it was too late. The countdown had begun. The room vibrated as the first of the self-destruct charges activated. Dane turned on his heel, walking away from the warlord's prison. The sounds of Vorak's fury faded behind him as the prison walls began to tremble, a deep rumble resonating through the floors. He didn't look back. As Dane exited the control room, the walls around him cracked and shuddered. Korthar 9 was dying, but Dane was living. He had outsmarted Vorak, exposed the corruption, and sealed his fate. The countdown echoed in his ears, growing louder, but Dane felt a rush of liberation. He had played the long game, and he had won. The prison shook, one final time as the self-destruct sequence reached its apex. The lights flickered, then went dark. The last remnants of Vorak's empire were swallowed by the abyss. Dane stepped through the exit hatch, feeling the cool air of space on his skin. Freedom. The galaxy wasn't ready for what was coming next. But Dane was. He had become the thing he had always hated, the thing that was feared. Humanity wasn't just a force in the galaxy anymore. It was a reckoning, and Dane Cross was its messenger.